Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Joining me again today is Dan Kelly, who is President and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks again for joining us, Dan.
Happy to be with you.
Lots of news going on this week in the world of small business and the federal government. We're going to focus our thoughts on some of the federal support programs and what the government did this week. Before we dive into some of those specific programs, just a general thought, Dan, on how you guys feel about what the government did this week in extending to some extent some programs.
Well, look, it was a relief that the government didn't just kill all of the programs that were set to expire this weekend. We were really worried that there would be no supports at the end of this week. The Ottawa had not played its hand and told us what was going to happen. So it is a relief that there are going to be some supports. But I got to tell you, our big worry is that they're, a support program that's out of reach for thousands and thousands of additional businesses is not particularly helpful. The bar is set super high, and many businesses are just not going to be able to get a nickel from some of the support programs that have now been put in place to replace the wage and the rent subsidy.
Okay, let's talk specifically, go down the line here on each of those programs, and maybe you can make some sense for people out there about these programs. And let's start with Canada Recovery Hiring Program. What is that? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages of it?
So this program is a continuation of an existing program. This is the one program that's stayed largely the same, but the government has kicked it forward and is now extending it until early May. That is really good news, and it is a worthwhile program. Any business that has had a 10% or more loss in revenue, they will be eligible for a 50% wage subsidy, but only for their new hires. Their new payroll, if they've increased wages or they've increased hours, that incremental payroll compared to what they had in the spring of 2021, that will be covered, 50% of that will be covered by this subsidy program. So that was in place before. It wasn't hugely used before as a result, because the wage subsidy itself was in place, which generally provided more subsidy to businesses. You only could use one. And so most businesses opted for the wage subsidy rather than this hiring incentive. Now that the wage subsidy is gone in most cases for businesses, we do think the hiring program will be of benefit to many, many SMEs across the country. And that was one of the bright spots of yesterday's news.
Okay, the other one is the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program. Again, what is it? What are the benefits and what are some of the negatives about it?
Look, it is good news that the government has kept that program. It largely keeps the wage and the rent supports in place, but only for a couple of sectors of the economy. For the tourism sector, they haven't particularly well defined who's in that bucket and who's not, but also for restaurants. And of course, these are two of the sectors that were hit hardest by COVID-19, not exclusively them. Yeah. For those businesses, though, we've heard from many already. Many of CFIB members have been calling us, restaurant owners, saying, wait a minute, to access even a nickel from the program, you have to have a 40% loss that month. Not only a 40% loss over the past year, but a 40% monthly loss. If your business is down by a third, you're still hit pretty hard. You're not going to be turning a profit for any time soon. And yet there's no support in those kinds of scenarios. Once you do hit that 50%, that 40% reduction in revenues, the subsidy program actually is not bad, but it's only for a handful of businesses in those sectors.
And let's face it, in those industries like the tourism, not tourism, but the restaurant industry, they're dealing with small profit margins anyways. So anything, any kind of loss of business is going to hurt them, right?
You're absolutely right. And what's also causing a lot of members some heartache right now is that they are not included in that more generous program for restaurants and hospitalities, even though it's not working for that industry super well. It is more generous for those with large losses. If you're the bowling alley or the gym that has had the exact same revenue loss as a restaurant, Your subsidy, if you can believe it, a 50% loss in revenue for a restaurant gives you a 50% wage and rent subsidy. If you're a bowling alley or a gym with a 50% loss in revenue, you have another program called the Hardest Hit program, and you get a 10% subsidy. So there's a lot of businesses, a dance studio, a gym, some events businesses that are saying, am I going to be included in that tourism program? Because it's a lot more lucrative than the one that I'm relegated to.
So what is that Hardest Hit Business Recovery Program?
So that's the program that the government has kept around for all businesses. So regardless of what sector in the economy, as long as you're not in tourism or in hospitality, restaurants, you can then gain access to this. The bar is higher. You know the other program, you can get into it with a 40% loss in revenue. For other industries, you have to show a 50% loss in revenue just to get a nickel. And even then, the subsidies are puny. They're like 10% of a subsidy with a 50% loss in revenue. So it's really quite unfair. And I suspect that their government is going to be under great pressure. Well, in fact, I know, because some of it's going to be coming from us, to open up that tourism program to a larger swath of the business community.
Yeah.
Why would a government say two businesses that have a 50% loss in revenue, a restaurant versus a bowling alley? The restaurant, you get 50%, the bowling alley, you get 10%. Why would a government policy make that happen? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. One other program, it's not business related, but in some ways, I guess it is the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is and what impacts will that have on businesses?
So look, this is basically the continuation for some of the Canada Response Benefit, or its earlier iteration, the CERB.
Yeah.
That program essentially has been scrapped by government that provided $300 a week pay to workers, particularly part-time workers, that had worked even just a tiny bit pre-pandemic. We are happy that the government is scaling back that blanket support, that flat rate support. However, they've kept in place, if your business is locked down, then you will qualify, and you're a restaurant worker and there is another lockdown, and there's signs of that happening in certain parts of the country, then you will still be eligible for that $300 a week, but only in specific situations. I think that is a reasonable approach. I will say, though, that we've already heard that for some business owners that use the CRB, like self-employed workers, the loss of that program is going to hurt. So it's not an across-the-board win from a business perspective by any means.
Now, if I'm a business owner, right, and a small business owner that I'm trying to figure all this out. This is a lot to digest. Like, how do you figure out all this stuff in a beneficial way for yourself?
Well, look, you'll forgive me the commercial here, but the first thing you should do is join the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Mario, if you can believe it, we have taken 120,000 calls from business owners since the start of the pandemic. And the number one thing that business owners are asking us about is, how do I make sense of this confusing mess of programs? Which ones am I eligible for and which ones am I not? We've been offering businesses, even if they can't pay us a membership, we've been providing free advice to business owners since the start of the pandemic. We're continuing to do so as a public service, just because, as you rightly said, these programs are so confusing, have changed a million times, and business owners are trying to make hide and hair of them, and it's tough.
Well, even for myself, I went on to the Government of Canada website yesterday and looked up all the list of things that I'm shaking my head trying to figure out. Okay, what is what? Right? It's not easy.
No, and that's why we have at CFIB dozens and dozens of staff who have poured over the details such that they exist right now of all of the programs. I will add, though, that the legislation to enable these programs hasn't even been put in place. So there's still time for us to influence the agenda. CFIB is launching a petition this weekend to try to push Ottawa, all the opposition parties and the government, to make serious changes. We believe that all the programs should have a lower bar, perhaps around 10% before you can access it. It should be sectorally agnostic so that businesses, regardless of what sector, with a similar loss can get the same subsidy. These are some of the changes we're pushing right now.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny you say that, right? Because I'm just thinking like, what can be considered some industry that's involved in tourism? Here I'm based in Calgary, so on Stephen Avenue Mall, the little retail shop that sells all these trinkets and Calgary, stuff,
Got
Calgary
it.
trinkets. Is that a tourism business or not? I don't know.
Well, and this is just it. Governments shouldn't be picking which sectors it provides support to and which sectors it doesn't.
Yeah.
It should be treating Canadian businesses the same. And so if your losses are similar, therefore, so should your subsidies. We believe that the tourism and hospitality program does make some sense, but the bar needs to be lowered. And then access to that program should be extended to far more sectors of the economy, really all sectors of the economy, as long as they have similar losses. Look, there are thousands and thousands of businesses hanging on by their fingernails right now. I want these subsidy programs gone. They're super expensive, but we have a difficult choice to make. We either have to tear away all of the restrictions. That means no more passports, no more capacity controls, no more masks, get rid of all of that and let businesses get out there and try to market themselves to their customers. Or we have to provide financial support to these businesses until such time as the restrictions can be eased. But businesses are in an impossible situation right now, and I do think it's premature for the government to pull away these supports until restrictions end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks once again, Dan, for shedding light on all this complicated mess that we're in these days.
Anytime, Mario. Good
All
to
right,
talk
so
to you.
good. That was Dan Kelly, President and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Thanks for joining us.